Zhou Heng stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, holding a bag of Himei's favorite spicy duck necks. His gaze fixed on Su Qing, whose face was flushed with rage, her eyes bloodshot and filled with fury. She looked at him as if she wanted to tear him apart limb by limb. His grip tightened around the bag. There was no way to keep the truth hidden forever, and today, it had finally come to light. Yet, seeing Su Qing suddenly appear before him like this still made him a little uneasy. After all, they had been married for 15 years, and Su Qing had never done anything to betray him. There was a twinge of guilt in his heart. But then, he thought of the gentle and soft Himei, who had followed him for 5 years without any complaints, even giving him a sweet and obedient son. A wave of courage surged within him. He straightened up, standing still as he awaited the storm that was about to hit. Su Qing rushed down the stairs, clawing and hitting him, screaming, "You heartless man! Speak! You've bought a house and are living together. You animal, do you have any conscience left? You even have a child together. You're not even human. Zhou Heng, you're a beast. Do you even have a heart?" Su Qing's voice cracked as she trembled and cried in anger. Zhou Heng looked at Su Qing, whose face was streaked with tears as she cursed him in a hysterical fit. Irritated, he frowned, his face full of disgust. The slight guilt he had felt vanished completely, and he shamelessly started to think of Su Qing as nothing more than a madwoman throwing a tantrum. He showed no emotion as he stood there, completely unafraid of what Su Qing might do. He stood there, unmoved, wearing the expression of someone who had nothing to lose, letting Su Qing hit and curse him as she pleased. "Ah, you're back? Who is this? Why are you hitting him? Let go, or I'm calling the police." A soft, sweet voice interrupted Su Qing's fury. Su Qing turned to see a woman, dressed provocatively, descending the stairs with snake-like grace. Her youthful face looked like it would drip water if touched, and her seductive eyes carried a warning as she looked at Su Qing. This was Himei. Su Qing stopped. Her eyes moved up and down, scanning Himei, and her heart felt as though a heavy stone was pressing down on it, suffocating her. On Himei's wrist was a limited edition diamond bracelet from a luxury brand. Su Qing had always loved it, but the price was outrageous. Even though Zhou Heng now earned enough to buy her 10 of them without breaking a sweat, Su Qing wasn't someone who liked to spend lavishly. Every penny in their household came from Zhou Heng's hard work, and she couldn't bring herself to splurge. Now, it seemed laughable. She had been saving money for her husband, only for it to be spent on another woman. Himei wore a Chanel necklace around her neck and high-end clothes and shoes, all luxuries that Su Qing had admired for a long time, but couldn't justify buying. The more she looked, the darker Su Qing's expression grew, her heart aching with anger and sorrow. Then, she saw the dazzling 8-carat diamond ring on Himei's right ring finger. The sight of it stung her eyes. A wave of burning rage surged up inside her, flaming through her veins and blazing in her furious gaze. "Call the police, then. Zhou Heng is my husband. You shameless fox. How dare you?" Su Qing had lost all control, like a furious lioness, and she lunged at Himei. With a quick step, she grabbed a fistful of Himei's long, red-purple hair and started slapping her face with all her might, kicking her viciously. "You shameless B*TC. You homewrecker!" Su Qing screamed as she hit Himei with all her strength. Himei winced in pain, her once beautiful face now scrunched up like a crumpled piece of paper. She desperately shielded her head with her hands, but pampered and unprepared, Himei was no match for Su Qing's onslaught. In tears, Himei cried out to Zhou Heng for help. "Appa Heng, save me." Zhou Heng saw his darling Himei being beaten senseless by Su Qing, who was like a wild beast. When he saw Himei's tear-filled eyes, so helpless and pitiful like a frightened little rabbit, his heart ached. It was as if a string inside him had snapped. He rushed over and pried Su Qing's fingers from Himei's hair. Once freed, Himei immediately hid behind Zhou Heng, clutching the back of his shirt tightly with both hands. Zhou Heng turned to Hime, holding her face gently, and saw red marks left by Su Qing's fingernails. His heart ached deeply. His eyes reddened as he turned to glare at Su Qing with fury. Just moments earlier, Hime had been pleading desperately, but now, her face twisted into a smug grin as she sneered at Su Qing in triumph. Zhou Heng shielded Hime like a mother cow protecting her calf, determined to guard her with his life. It was clear, if anyone wanted to harm Hime, they'd have to step over his dead body first. Su Qing, on the brink of an emotional breakdown, charged forward recklessly. She was hell-bent on tearing apart the shameless woman who had wrecked her life. Seeing Su Qing's relentless fury, her hysterical screaming, and Hime trembling behind him, an inexplicable rage flared up inside Zhou Heng. "Have you had enough?" With a sharp slap, Zhou Heng struck Su Qing across the face. A vivid red handprint instantly appeared on her cheek. Su Qing clutched her face, staring at him in shock, unable to believe what had just happened. This was the man who had once promised to take care of her for a lifetime, and now, for the sake of a young, beautiful mistress, he had hit her. The wife who had been with him since she was 18, who had stood by his side through thick and thin, sacrificing her best years for him. That single slap shattered Su Qing's world. She broke down, hurling kicks and punches at Zhou Heng like a madwoman. To Zhou Heng, she now looked like a rabid dog, but he didn't back down. He grabbed her hair, raining blows down on her without mercy. The two of them wrestled violently, locked in a vicious fight. Hime, hiding on the side, trembled as she watched the chaos unfold, but her eyes betrayed her. Although her mouth uttered words of concern for Zhou Heng, her face couldn't conceal the smug satisfaction, her smile glowing with triumph. In the end, Su Qing suffered 2 broken ribs and had to be hospitalized. Zhou Heng only came away with minor injuries, some bruises and scrapes. Su Qing had lost control in the moment, but had still held back. Zhou Heng, on the other hand, had wanted her dead. If it weren't for the police being called, she might not have made it out of the emergency room alive. Lying in her hospital bed, covered in bruises, her abdomen throbbing with pain, Su Qing thought about the man who had once vowed to care for her forever. Now, with fists aimed at her as if she were his mortal enemy, her heart went cold. She felt as though all life had drained out of her. She let out a bitter laugh, mocking herself. These past 15 years, she realized, had been nothing more than a cruel joke. Su Qing had met Zhou Heng through a mutual friend. Su Qing had a delicate and lively appearance, while Zhou Heng's looks were mediocre at best. He had a broad forehead, small eyes, a square face, an upturned nose, and thick lips. His height was average. The only feature he could boast of was his smooth, fair skin, which had the lustrous glow of high-quality jade. Su Qing didn't feel much for Zhou Heng initially, but Zhou Heng had fallen for her at first sight. Despite his ordinary looks, Zhou Heng was full of cunning and charm. He began to pursue Su Qing with fierce determination, showering her with attention and care. Su Qing had grown up in a single-parent household. Her mother had raised her alone, working tirelessly to make ends meet. As a result, Su Qing had grown up in an environment devoid of affection. Faced with Zhou Heng's relentless love and affection, Su Qing, a naive and inexperienced young woman just stepping into society, was defenseless. It wasn't long before she fell for him. The first time Su Qing introduced Zhou Heng to her mother, he arrived with an armful of gifts, and his smooth-talking ways quickly won over her mother, making her beam with happiness. However, once Zhou Heng was sent out to buy something, Su Qing's mother turned to her with a serious expression, saying, "He's not the right one for you." Su Qing was utterly confused. Just moments ago, her mother had been all smiles, laughing and chatting with Zhou Heng, but now her face had changed as suddenly as the weather in June. What had been sunny skies just a second ago was now overcast with dark clouds. Seeing Su Qing's bewildered expression, her mother sighed, gently patting her shoulder. "I've been in business for many years and met all sorts of people. Zhou Heng is the type who can endure hardship, but he won't stay loyal if he becomes wealthy. If one day he has money, he'll definitely abandon you. Mom, no way. You're overthinking it. Zhou Heng isn't like that. Su Qing immediately protested. She had already been enchanted by Zhou Heng's charm, believing her mother's words to be nothing more than needless worry. Her mother opened her mouth as if to say something, but, seeing the tender look in Su Qing's eyes, realized that her daughter had truly fallen in love. Over the years, as she had been preoccupied with making a living, she had paid little attention to Su Qing. Now, without realizing it, Su Qing had developed a stubborn streak. She wouldn't stop until she hit a wall. With a sigh, her mother resigned herself.
Fine.
Nothing I say will matter now. You'll have to walk this road yourself. Her mother's words had been prophetic. Now, lying in that hospital bed, every breath sending pain through her chest, Su Qing couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Her life had indeed turned into the joke her mother had foreseen. Zhou Heng truly could endure hardship, but not prosperity. Su Qing had disregarded her mother's warnings and insisted on marrying Zhou Heng. Zhou Heng came from a poor family with 3 brothers. He was the second son. When they married, the ceremony was simple, with only a small banquet. Zhou Heng's family had given a dowry of 20,000 yuan, and even that was borrowed. Their new home was nothing more than a low, shabby house made of earth. They didn't even have new bedding for the wedding night. On their wedding night, Zhou Heng held Su Qing and made a solemn vow. I will earn a lot of money and give Su Qing the good life. I'll take care of her for the rest of my life. Su Qing's mother secretly gave her 100,000 yuan and advised her to keep it for herself and not tell anyone. She had longed for a child for years. She had already been pregnant twice before, but was forced to terminate both pregnancies due to their financial situation, shedding tears of sorrow each time. Because of the 2 prior miscarriages and the fact that she hadn't taken care of herself afterward, Su Qing's health was already badly damaged, making this pregnancy a fragile one. The doctor warned her to be extra careful and advised bed rest. Due to her physical condition, the pregnancy was at a high risk of miscarriage. Su Qing took every precaution, her heart full of both anxiety and joy. But Zhou Heng seemed indifferent. He showed little excitement about the baby and was even a bit cold. Caught up in her happiness about becoming a mother, Su Qing didn't notice Zhou Heng's strange behavior. She thought he was just too busy with work to show his emotions. After all, she was no longer the young bride who would get upset over every little thing. What was the point of arguing over trivial matters? Zhou Heng remained busy every day, leaving early and returning late, rarely spending time at home. He was even away on a business trip when Su Qing gave birth. Once, Su Qing saw that Zhou Heng had ordered a high-end baby stroller online. She felt both guilty and happy. They had shared a bed for 10 years, yet she had doubted his love for their child. Seeing that stroller erased all her resentment toward him. He cared about the baby, he was just too busy, she convinced herself. A few months later, in the hospital, Su Qing had just survived the agony of childbirth and was lying weakly in bed, gazing at the soft, tiny bundle beside her. Her heart melted. She had a baby boy, just as she'd hoped. She had already chosen the name long ago, Zhou Qi. In the hospital room, it was only Su Qing's mother bustling around to take care of everything. Zhou Heng's family didn't show up at all. When she called Zhou Heng, he said he was in a meeting and would come after work. Su Qing felt a hollow ache in her chest. What's Zhou Heng so busy with that he can't be here? You've just had the baby. What could possibly be more important than his wife and child? Su Qing's mother complained angrily. Mom, don't say that. Zhou Heng's in a meeting. Su Qing defended him, but her words sounded weak and unconvincing. What meeting is more important than you two? I'm telling you, he just doesn't care, her mother fumed. She glared at Su Qing, still defending Zhou Heng, and felt an overwhelming frustration. I told you years ago that he wasn't reliable, but... Seeing her daughter's face darken, her mother stopped talking. Though she was filled with anger at Zhou Heng, Su Qing was in no condition to be upset right now. Her mother swallowed her words and said no more. By the time Zhou Qi turned 1, Su Qing had never seen that fancy stroller. Yet she remembered the online order clearly. Meanwhile, Zhou Heng's social engagements became more frequent, and his business trips more numerous. From the time Zhou Qi was born, Zhou Heng hadn't once held or spent any meaningful time with his son. Su Qing assumed that as their business grew, Zhou Heng simply had no time for family matters. As a wife, she felt she should understand and support him. A childhood friend who had started a business invited Su Qing to join as a partner. Since this friend was her closest confidant, Su Qing invested her private savings into the venture without telling Zhou Heng. Now, Su Qing was immensely relieved that Zhou Heng didn't know about this investment. Otherwise, she'd have no way out at all. Now, Zhou Qi was 5 years old, and Zhou Heng had never spent time with him. It seemed that throughout Zhou Qi's life, Zhou Heng had merely played the role of a bystander. In his heart, Zhou Qi was nothing more than a stranger who happened to share his blood. Su Qing never blamed Zhou Heng because she firmly believed that he was simply too busy. After all, how could Zhou Heng forget the hard days they had endured together, struggling to build a life? Su Qing constantly searched for reasons to convince herself, deceiving herself into making excuses for Zhou Heng. But one day, a phone call from a strange woman shattered all the illusions Su Qing had built. When Su Qing saw the same unfamiliar number repeatedly calling her, she assumed it was a friend with a new phone, perhaps in urgent need of help. She answered the call, and a sultry, impatient voice came through. "Is Zhou Heng there? His son is sick. Can you pass the phone to him?" Su Qing glanced at her own son, Qi, happily playing nearby. Her heart sank. With a composed voice, she asked, "Who are you?" "I'm his wife, ma'am. You must be the nanny, right? Please tell Zhou Heng that Yang has a fever." "Thanks so much." The other woman's tone was pleading, as if Su Qing were being unreasonable for hesitating. "Okay, I'll let him know," Su Qing replied, her voice growing colder. Inside, she wanted to reach through the phone and strangle the person on the other end. "Thanks. You're such a help," the woman said gratefully before hanging up. Su Qing's face darkened as she felt a wave of anger surge through her. She added the woman's number to WeChat under a fake identity and soon found herself looking at pictures of a happy family, Zhou Heng, the woman, and a child, all smiling together. It was like being stabbed in the heart. The child was born on the same day as Zhou Qi. Even more painful was the fact that they had been delivered in the same hospital. While Su Qing had been enduring the pains of a natural birth alone, Zhou Heng had been anxiously waiting outside another room, where his mistress was having a C-section. He even posted online, "Today is such a thrilling, nerve-wracking, yet joyous day. Go, my love, you can do it. I love you," along with a picture of the other woman, heavily pregnant. To make it worse, Zhou Heng's family had commented on the post, encouraging him to take good care of his wife. And Zhou Heng had replied, "Of course I will." The expensive stroller Zhou Heng had bought wasn't for Qi, it was for Yang, the son of his mistress. That picture of a happy family, with the baby in the stroller, tore Su Qing's heart apart, cutting her like 1,000 tiny blades. It wasn't just Zhou Heng who was deceiving her, his whole family was treating her like a fool. While Zhou Heng was fully present for every moment of Yang's life, even showering him with gifts like a Lamborghini toy car, he had neglected Zhou Qi's every milestone. Zhou Heng had showered his mistress with lavish gifts, like a diamond necklace from Chanel, and had taken her on a week-long trip to Paris. He even bought her parents a luxurious riverside villa, claiming it would help improve their health. Meanwhile, when Su Qing's mother, Su Ma, had gotten sick, Zhou Heng's only response was always, "I'm busy." Through her network, Su Qing quickly found out the mistress's name, Hime, and her address. Today, she decided to confront this humiliating reality head-on. Touching her face, where Zhou Heng had once struck her, the pain still burned. That slap had done her a favor, waking her from the dream she had so naively woven. A month later, Su Qing was discharged from the hospital. She hadn't told anyone about what had happened. She didn't want her mother to worry anymore. She had ignored her mother's advice for so long, and now she would bear the consequences alone. But Su Qing wasn't someone who could be bullied forever. She began to plan. After consulting a lawyer, Su Qing learned that if she gathered enough evidence, Zhou Heng could be charged with bigamy. Zhou Heng had been transferring assets to his brother's names, which explained why he acted so brazenly even when caught. The lawyer advised that once enough evidence was collected, Su Qing could claim her share of the assets. Su Qing already had a mountain of evidence against Zhou Heng's affair with He Mei. Now, she just needed a DNA test to prove Yang Yang was Zhou Heng's child. She had no intention of letting these two escape so easily. Money makes the world go round, after all. With the profits from her best friend's successful business, Su Qing had saved a considerable amount of money. One night, at a banquet, Su Qing met Dong Ge, a straightforward and loyal man with a reputation for being tough, but also a money grubber. Dong Ji's eyes lit up when he saw the stack of cash Su Qing handed him, like a hungry wolf spotting its prey. "For this little job?" he asked in disbelief, staring at the wad of cash. "Yes, just a small matter for you, Dong Ge," Su Qing replied, raising her glass with a smile. "No problem, leave it to me." Dong Ge pounded his chest in promise, grinning from ear to ear. Zhou Heng hadn't come home in a long time, but Su Qing no longer cared. She was just waiting for the right result. A few days later, Dong sent a DNA test report. Looking at the 99.9% match confirming paternity, Su Qing smiled. On the day of the court hearing, He Mei showed up too. She clung to Zhou Heng's arm, leaning into him as if they were simply strolling down the street, oblivious to everyone else. Their intimate behavior was so blatant that it made Su Qing seem like the third wheel in their relationship. The sight of the two of them disgusted Su Qing so much that she almost wanted to gouge out her own eyes just to avoid seeing it. Oh wow, still not divorced, and they're already all over each other. They're practically announcing she's the other woman, Su Qing's best friend said, rolling her eyes in disgust, standing up for her. "Miss, you're going too far. Ah Heng loves me. He stopped loving Aunt Su Qing a long time ago. It's Aunt Su Qing who's clinging to him," He Mei said pitifully, lowering her head, her eyes misting over, making it seem like Su Qing and her friend were bullying her. TSK. Watching He Mei's performance, Su Qing thought it was a shame she hadn't gone into acting. Her best friend, enraged by being called Aunt by He Mei, wanted to rush over and hit her. Su Qing held her back tightly. "We've got more important things to do. Ignore this stray dog." Hearing herself referred to as a dog, He Mei appeared even more aggrieved. She lowered her head as tears streamed down her face like a broken string of pearls. Zhou Heng looked at the two women with a warning glare, holding He Mei in his arms, comforting her constantly. "So revolting," Su Qing screamed internally. Perhaps the heavens heard her plea, and the court session began. Su Qing had all her evidence in order. Zhou Heng remained unfazed, certain that Su Qing couldn't have possibly obtained a hair sample from Zhou Yang. At most, the court would grant the divorce, and since he had already moved most of the assets, Su Qing would get next to nothing. In his mind, the divorce meant that Su Qing wouldn't get a penny. He believed that if only Su Qing had kept enduring quietly, she could still be living her life as Mrs. Zhou. After today, with no income, she'd probably be stuck washing dishes in a restaurant just to get by. Zhou Heng was already picturing Su Qing being scolded by a restaurant owner, groveling in shame, and the thought brought a smile to his face. But when Su Qing presented the paternity test, Zhou Heng's smile froze. "How do you have that report?" Zhou Heng asked, his mouth agape in disbelief. "Large enough to fit an egg." "Guess," Su Qing said with a triumphant smile. Zhou Heng was rooted to the spot as a creeping fear began to take over him. Without suspense, Su Qing won the divorce case. Zhou Heng was convicted of bigamy and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Watching the once smug couple now looking defeated like roosters after a fight, Su Qing felt a wave of satisfaction wash over her. With Zhou Heng in prison, Su Qing grew busier. She started a company, specifically targeting Zhou Heng's clients. Zhou Heng had left the company in the hands of his brothers. However, his brothers knew nothing about the business and spent their days fighting over petty issues. Hime was good for nothing but spending money. When she tried handling the business, it was one mistake after another. The employees saw her as nothing more than a pretty face with no substance. With no capable leadership, the company spiraled into chaos, leaving employees increasingly disgruntled. Meanwhile, Su Qing was well-versed in the business. This company had been built by both her and Zhou Heng. To her, it was like her own child. Her deep understanding of the clients allowed her to easily gain control of all the records, and her treatment of the employees as family earned her their loyalty. Many of them, knowing the backstory, voluntarily quit and joined Su Qing's company. Su Qing was deeply grateful, rewarding her loyal employees with excellent benefits. Their salaries were double what they had been at Zhou Heng's company, leading more and more employees to jump ship. Gradually, all the clients followed, and Zhou Heng's company was reduced to nothing more than an empty shell. When Zhou Heng found out, he was furious, but trapped in prison, there was nothing he could do. 2 years later, when Zhou Heng was released, his company was in ruins, leaving him no choice but to borrow money. Facing Su Qing's relentless business attacks, Zhou Heng tried to start anew. However, someone reported him to the authorities, and overnight, his company collapsed into a bubble. Sitting at her desk, Su Qing saw the news of Zhou Heng's company going bankrupt, leaving him with millions in debt, and his suicide by jumping from a building. She smiled. Another headline caught her eye. A woman surnamed "He was attacked with acid on the street," left horribly disfigured. The assailant remains at large, and the police have no leads. The photo showed Hime wrapped up like a mummy, while 2 elderly people wept bitterly at her side. Su Qing suddenly felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Zhou Heng went to his grave, never understanding how Su Qing had gotten hold of the DNA report. Back then, he had taken every possible precaution, but Su Qing had asked Dong to get a hair sample from Zhouyang. With his extensive connections, Dong handled it quickly. And as for the acid attack on Hime, that had been Su Qing's doing too, carried out by someone Dong had found. Su Qing could imagine how Hime, once so beautiful, would now have to live out her days with a face that was neither human nor ghost. That was a fate worse than death. Stretching her arms, Su Qing stood up and opened the curtains, taking in the bright world outside. Su Qing had never been one to back down.